Surah Al-Baqarah has been described by Imam al-Suyuti amongst other ulama as being the little Quran, or the Quran in miniature. Imam al-Suyuti, one of the great lovers of Allah's book, documenters of its inner symmetries and profundities. And he says that there is no major theme in Allah's book that is not summarized or at least announced in Surah number 2. All of the ibadat are mentioned. About halfway through, Allah announces the great institution of fasting, siyam. The way he does it is by linking it, this is Imam al-Suyuti's great vision of the internal structure of Al-Baqarah, to the principle with which Surah Al-Baqarah begins, which is Hudan lil-Muttaqeen, guidance for the people of taqwa, الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون, those who believe in the unseen, establish the prayer and bestow of what we have given them. وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ, and those who believe in that which is revealed to you, alayhi salatu wassalam, and that which was revealed to those who came before you. And where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, 150 verses later, reaches the subject of siyam, the same principle is invoked. It's linked as a kind of reminder to the fact that this is an ancient institution. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam is not innovating in any of the usul, any of the fundamentals, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what we need to know about him, his attributes and his actions in history cannot change, because he subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change. But similarly, the ways in which we reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have always been available, because they are always effective. Their details may change. Formalities, the rules and regulations can shift from ummah to ummah. There has been more than one sharia. But that is just at the surface. Deep down, there is only one deen, only one way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of its great traditions has always been siyam, or fasting. Some of the ulama will tell us that in fact this is the first of all of the ibadat. Because in the Jannah, before being transferred into this world, the first two human beings could do whatever they wanted, except they should not approach a certain tree or eat of its fruit. So they fasted. As far as we can tell, none of the other formal prohibitions applied, but that prohibition seems to be ancient. Now we know that every ummah, as far as scholars and historians can tell, has had rituals of fasting. Just last week, the Jewish community celebrated Yom Kippur. In many ways, seems to resemble Muslim traditions of fasting, abstaining during the daylight hours and for much of the night as well from food and drink. It's important for us to remember this, because in a world that likes to regard us as aliens, as creatures from another planet, who have nothing to say to the traditions of the West and of modernity, it's our responsibility to remind them that what we really stand for, and most eminently the basic pillars of our religion, are part of everybody's normative humanity. Fasting is not something strange. The secular world may find it so. Christians and Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, any follower of the traditional religion will not find us strange at all. They may find our form of fasting unusual. They may find it strenuous, but the principle is not strange to them. I think too often we tend to present ourselves in communal terms, them against us, as if the boundary between Islam and Kufr was a boundary between human beings and animals. Perhaps the best response is instead to see it as the boundary between those who, through no particular virtue of their own, have been adequately exposed to the da'wah, and those who, usually, through no particular fault of their own, have not. And if they have not been, then usually they have us to blame, not themselves, although there are very, very many exceptions. How different our situation would be if we presented ourselves as bearers of that which is universally and normally human, rather than advocates of something that seems to exist on the fringes of the modern human experience. We can only do this, I think, if we can persuade people that the spirit of fasting, as it's always been understood in the various religious traditions of mankind, is something that has an ethical core. How are we when we fast? This morning I gave a talk to some policemen. And their engagement, it seems, with fasting is very often that that's when there are problems in Muslim communities, perhaps fights, perhaps problems of speeding and bad driving as iftar comes closer. How impressive it would be if the crime statistics went drastically down. How impressive it would be in Iraq if instead of an upsurge in violence in the holy month, things became calm and quiet as Muslims of all persuasions took stock. And this is in fact the commandment in the hadith. There's no way around it. Fasting month is not a time for agitation. It's not a time for self-indulgence and bad behavior. Because the hadith says, and this is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, as-sawmu junnah. Fasting is a protection. It's like a suit of armor. فَإِذَا كَانَ أَحَدُكُمْ صَائِمًا فَلَا يَرْفُثْ وَلَا يَجْهَلْ وَإِنْ قَاتَلَهُ أَحَدٌ أَوْ شَاتَمَهُ فَلْيَقُلْ إِنِّي صَائِمٌ. If one of you is fasting, the hadith says, then let him not use rough, foul language, and let him not ignorantly transgress. And if somebody tries to fight him or insults him, let him just say, I am fasting. If that's not our instinct, then the fast is not functioning, it's not working. It's not a protection. Therefore, we need to investigate our intentions. And we need to remember another hadith which is directly linked, which is about the kasri shahwa, breaking the appetite, which is another sound hadith, which runs, Inna shaytana yajri fi ibni Adama majra ad-dam, fadayyiqu majarihi bil-ju'. The shaitan flows in the sons of Adam, as does the blood. So narrow his channels through hunger. What kind of fasting is it when we end up being even heavier at the end of the month than at the outset? We can experience hunger during the day, but if we overeat at night, and the world knows that we're overeating, then we've not understood that hunger itself is beneficial, not as a deprivation, but something that is a positive good. Often we hear it said that Ramadan is partly there to help us feel solidarity with those who, without being able to choose in the matter, are hungry. That's obviously true. But the virtue of hunger, of ju', is something that I think has been regrettably forgotten. But at the beginning of the month, the angel stands up to remind us of this if we have ears to hear. إذا دخل شهر رمضان غلقت أبواب النار وفتحت أبواب الجنة وصفدت الشياطين ونادى مناد يا باغي الخير هلم ويا باغي الشر يقصر. When Ramadan comes in, the doors of heaven are opened, the doors of hell are closed, and the demons are chained, and a herald calls out, saying, O you who are looking for good, rise up. O you who are looking for wickedness, restrain yourself. Fasting is an ibadah, but it has a strongly ethical dimension as well. It's about that most fundamental of ethical capacities, which is to restrain one's hand. But that's just the beginning. as the ulama have always made it clear, it is not just about restraining one's hand from that which is in the fiqh now for a few hours haram. It's about restraining the heart as well, about turning the heart away from that which the hand cannot embrace. And that means cultivating the inward virtues also, so that people respect those who are fasting, not just because it's a kind of endurance test, but because they clearly have become lighter, better, more angelic people. Imam Sufyan al-Thawri radiallahu anhu, one of the great imams of the early period of our history, used to say, al-ghibatu tufsidu siyam. This was in his fiqh, and he was a great faqih of the city of Kufa. Backbiting breaks the fast. That was his ruling. And if you were guilty of backbiting, then you had to make it up again later. That's not been incorporated into the mainstream fiqh of the ulama. Nonetheless, it indicates that the earliest generations had a certain ethical sensitivity at this time, which perhaps we've lost. Perhaps the fast has become something rough, something mechanical, just a yearly hurdle that we jump over and then forget very quickly when the Eid is behind us. But instead, the message of fasting is what the message of fasting has always been, which is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a reason for it, in a way that He doesn't give us a reason for some of the other ibadat. When prayer is prescribed and when zakat is prescribed, generally the illah, the cause, is not supplied in the text. But in the case of fasting, it is. And it is about taqwa. And that takes us back to Imam al-Suyuti's point, that this verse in particular links with the opening verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, which shows that the text itself is hudan lil muttaqeen, guidance for those who have taqwa. What is this taqwa? Taqwa means to be fully conscious. It really means nothing more than that. Fully conscious in the full sense. In other words, aware of who you are, everything that you're doing, moral implications of everything that you're doing, and the fact that you're being watched by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that you do, and indeed in all of the movements of your heart. That's why the early generations of this ummah were known for their fearfulness, because they were afraid of Allah's quality of ar-raqib. He was constantly watching over them. Now, even when we're fasting, how often do we have that immediate blazing awareness that at every single moment of our lives there is the same unflagging, unchanging, divine scrutiny of what we do in public and what we do in private. Then on those secret moments, He is there just as much as He is when we're in front of our friends and family. He is always with us. Fasting, if it's about taqwa, is about precisely that. It's about an inward state of awareness. It's about knowing that Allah is Raqib. And more than that, it's about showing that one sincerely is conscious by actually acting accordingly. And that's why we find these interesting hadiths, and it's expressed in a number of different phrases. That kullu hasanatin bi'ashri amthaliha. This is just one wording of the hadith. Every good action is rewarded tenfold, ila sab'imi'ati da'af, to 700-fold, illa siyam, فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. Except fasting, because that is mine, as Allah says, and I reward it. Why is it that these other good deeds seem to have a quantitative reward, and this one has a reward that is from the divine presence and therefore is limitless, partake somehow in His infinity? It's because when we engage in other ibadat, sometimes we're doing them, sometimes we are not. Sometimes we're giving sadaqah, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're in salat, sometimes we're not. But fasting is something that's semi-permanent, because taqwa itself is something that is required to be permanent. For 14, 16 hours a day, we are in the state of suspension from certain obvious appetites, and in this hunger-based heightened awareness of our dependence upon Him through His rizq and our vulnerability. That is why the shaitan is broken in our bodies by hunger, because we have less pride, less sense of self-sufficiency. We know that Allah alone is al-Ghani. We are truly the poor. He is the rich. We are just the fuqara in an absolute sense, because nothing that we have is truly ours. Everything that is truly His. So this is what happens when we get beneath the surface of Ramadan and consider the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has issued us with this great commandment to fast, indicating first of all that this is what earlier ummas used to do, and indicating also that if we're truly to be in the line of the prophets alayhimus salam, we need to recognize that every form of worship has a purpose, and there is no purpose higher than cultivating taqwa, because that is the state with which we hope to meet our Lord. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take us from the outward forms of the fast into the inward forms, to make us fast not just with our bodies, but with our minds and with our hearts as well, to make us examples for other people, so that instead of becoming irritable, short-tempered and self-pitying, we start to take seriously the suffering and the needs and the awareness of other people. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.